Hi, this is Robert with Cruzbike, and today we're going to be assembling the new Cruzbike T50. Everything you need to build the complete bike is in the box, so let's take a look and get started. We have our seat cushion, we have our rear wheel, have our front drive wheel, parts box, rear seat stay, we'll go over that later, handlebars with pre-installed grips, shifter, and brake levers. We have our pre-assembled new resin seat. All the brackets are installed for you. Nice and easy. And we have our main frame. Also in the box you'll find a length of housing. That's for the front brake. As well as some literature. We have some different welcome letter in here, some assembly notes, and as always we have our wonderful romance guide. Highly recommend you take a read of that before you start riding, especially if you are new to riding a cruise bike. All of our wrapping on the main frame, everything is pre-installed, as you can see, just like this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to check out our parts box here, make sure we have everything ready to go. Included with the completes is a set of tools like this, and also in our parts box we have our front stem for the handlebars and the riser. We also have our pedals. We have our rear derailleur with the hanger installed. The hanger's pre-installed. Also note that the small chainring bolt, the bolt that holds the derailleur hanger to the frame, is pre-installed in the hanger itself. We also have some spare grips here. Since our handlebars are already wrapped, we're just going to set those in the extras pile. Go ahead and save those if you want. We also have our cables, precisely the brake cables. We have our chain, and we also have some protective strips. These are for you to add to your head tube or anywhere where you might have wires or cables brushing up against the frame, kind of an extra bonus there. We have our front and our rear wheel skewers. We'll save those. And we also have our riser. And that should be everything we need to get our Cruzbike T50 all assembled and ready to go. Alright, let's get our work area prepped and we will get started. Yes, but first, coffee. Right, let's clear our work area here. We don't need the seat. We also don't need these parts, and we don't need those parts either, and we don't need those at the moment, and we don't need that at the moment. Basically all we need is the frame set to start. And to get going, we're going to need our 5mm Allen and our derailleur. Now note again that the nut is pre-installed. The derailleur is installed on the hanger. Everything's good to go here. All we got to do is install it on the fork. So we're going to use our 5mm Allen to take the small nut out. Note it's two-sided, so this is just a standard derailleur hanger bolt that any bike is going to have, any bike that has a derailleur hanger like this. I like to just set the bike on the side here, and we're just going to simply put the back side of the nut in the frame, right through the fork like that. Set our hanger on and put the top part in and tighten that up with our 5mm Allen. Now it should be nice and snug. Make sure it's tight and not going to come out. Alright, once we have that set aside, I'm going to get my assembly favorite item, which is our wonderful wheel stand. You don't need this, but it makes a big difference if you can just do the assembly of the bike when it's standing up. We're going to take our protective end caps off of our drive wheel, and we're going to insert our skewer. Now note the lever side of the skewer goes on the brake side, and then our spring and our nut goes on the other side. We're going to just preset this right in our wheel stand. That'll give us a nice place to hold the wheel, and then we can simply lift the main frame and just set the front fork right down over the wheel and then tighten the skewer. Once we have that done, then we can repeat the exact same process for the rear wheel. Simply roll it right in there, make sure everything clears the rotor into the brake pads. The derailleur tabs on the back dropouts are pretty big, so make sure you have enough opening in the skewer to get the wheel on. Now let's check our derailleur jockey wheels alignment up against our cassette. We want to make sure that the very first cog of the cassette right there is lined up with the jockey wheel. We want a straight across line there. Everything should be pretty preset from the factory. You always want to check this, however, just in case, and use the upper and the lower limit screws to adjust it if it needs adjustment. So here I'm going to use a Phillips head screwdriver, and in this case the top screw is the high gear adjustment, and if I turn this you can see the jockey wheel moving back and forth because it's limiting the travel of the derailleur. We want to make sure by doing slight turns of that screwdriver, if necessary, that the jockey wheel lines up with the small cog. Conversely, if we move the cage out and then push the derailleur all the way in, we can see the limit of the derailleur towards the large cog. And that's the lower screw, the L limit. We want to make sure that we're not pushing the derailleur too far, because if we do, then the chain will go off the cassette and into the spokes. Okay, now that we're done messing around with checking out our derailleur settings, for fun we can go to the riser. So here we're going to undo the 5mm Allen bolt that holds the boom clamp here, and then we're going to lift this right off. What we want is just to have the bolt end facing down. So this one is upside down, so I'm just going to rotate it around and pivot this down so that the top of the pivot clamp is in the upper position. Now also note there's another clamp on the steer tube that's holding your headset tension, so you do not want to loosen that bolt at all. Once we have that on, we will put our riser tube on, which notch facing backwards, and we will insert it all the way down into the pivot clamp. It's very important that it's bottomed out all the way, and then we will hold with pressure and then tighten the 5mm bolts on the pivot clamp. And again, make sure you don't loosen the clamp that holds the headset tension that's pre-installed from the factory. Once we have our pivot clamp bolts tightened, we can see here this is how we do our adjustment. For pedal reach, we're just going to set it at this distance here for now and give it a preliminary snug down for the rest of assembly. Alright, let's install our stem. So we've taken our top cap off temporarily, install our stem, and then we can put our top cap back on. Now this particular stem uses 4mm Allen bolts. Different stems may vary. We're going to line up the stem with the front of the bike so everything's nice and aligned, and then we'll tighten down our stem bolts. Now when you do a fit later, this stem can go up or down. You can also get longer stems from any bike shop that are longer, and that can help you customize the handlebar reach on the cruise bike. We're going to jump to our handlebars here. We have our pre-wrapped and set up handlebars from the factory, all ready to go. I'm going to take our front shifter cable housing and set it aside here, and then we will undo the 4mm bolts off this particular stem and install our handlebars. Pretty much just have a nice vertical orientation of the grips to get started, and then we will tighten our handlebars down. Make sure there's an even gap on the top and the bottom of the handlebar clamp always. And once we've done that, we can install our cable housing, which we're going to route through the pivot clamp. It's a nice, easy, clean place to route our cable housing. I'm going to undo our cable housing here. Be careful not to fray it. I'm going to simply route it down through the pivot clamp. And then once we have it down through the pivot clamp, we can route it through the front part of the fork. Now if the little clips pop off, they're very easy to just pop back on. Personally, these clips, I find they wear out after a while, so I prefer to use zip ties. So if you have zip ties, go ahead and zip tie the cable to the cable stops there. Otherwise the clips just press back on. Once we have that, we can route our cable through the back side of the derailleur. We're not going to attach it yet. We're going to move on to other parts here. Rear brake. Our housing is pre-installed through the frame. We're going to simply unwrap the housing here. We're going to go back up and through the pivot clamp, similar to the way we did the derailleur housing. Make sure that's nice and clean, and then route that to the right brake lever. Alright, now that we have our brake cable housing run, we're going to run our cable. So we're going to insert our cable through the lever. You can go in through the back side of the lever like this, or you can align up the adjuster so you can do it that way. We just want to get our long rear brake cable through the lever, through the housing, then attach the cable end to the lever itself. Make sure everything is nice and snug and nothing is binding. Give a nice pull on that cable from the back side and make sure everything is all set to go. Now, before we attach our cables, we're going to move to the front, install our front housing. That's that extra piece of housing that you found in the box. Again, we're going to go down through the pivot clamp, through the front part of the fork where we have our small cable brace on right there, and then we're going to simply go over there to the left lever and then the cable housing goes right back to the brake. And again, just like the rear brake, we're going to take our front cable and insert our front brake cable in through the housing and then down to the brake. Okay, now that we have our cables installed and pre-run, we're going to attach our brake cables. Start at the rear. We use our 5mm Allen to undo the pinch bolt. You want to make sure you do not pull these all the way out. Just loosen them enough that you can squeeze the cable underneath the pinch bolt. There's a little channel for the cable to ride in. You'll see it when you do the install. Then we're going to preset this tension and check our wheel. Now, I'm not going to go over a full disc brake adjustment here. Everything should be pretty closely set from the factory. You'll want to fine-tune your brakes after you get your bike fully assembled. If you are unaware on how to do that, I highly recommend a final fine-tune by a local bike shop. but we want to make sure our brakes are nice and set with our cables nice and snug at the pinch bolt. Alright, now that we've checked our derailleur earlier, now we're going to attach our cable. So we're going to make sure our shifter is all the way in the fully downshifted position, so we have the most slack, and then the cable simply goes underneath the pinch bolt. We're going to pull it snug, and then we're going to tighten our Allen bolt onto the derailleur. And again, just like the brakes, you might have to do some fine tuning of the indexing later, and that's something, if you know how to do that, that's relatively easy on this particular shifting setup. Otherwise, our local shop will be able to help you do that fine tune. Now, one of the main differences with the new T50 here is our moving to this great seat rail setup. So the seat simply bolts to the rail, and we have infinite adjustment fore and aft of the seat. Now you'll note there's two sets of holes on the brackets. There's a lower set of holes, as in higher, and then also the front holes. We want to use on the back the very uppermost holes, the first set of holes that go down onto the bolts. You can use the other set of holes to make the back of the seat lower. You want to be careful though when you do that you don't scratch the frame. So we're going to very carefully loosen the bolts until they're just threaded in, and that will allow us to actually set the brackets down over the bolts. And then we're going to hand tighten these into the small recesses in the clamp. And again, you want to fully lower the front clamps onto the bolts, and then we're going to use the very first set of holes on the lower part of the seat. We're going to tighten these up nice and snug. Now I have the seat set kind of in the center for now, which is pretty good to start. You can always play with your seat position. Moving it forward can help you get more seat recline and get closer to the pedals. Moving it back can make your seat more upright, depending on your leg length. Lots of adjustment there. Okay, now let's remove our bolts. These M6 bolts at the back that are pre-installed into the frame. These are for our lower seat strut mounts. I'm going to simply take those bolts off and reinstall them with our seat mount. And we want to be careful we don't let this seat strut fall backwards. It's pretty weighty, so just make sure you don't let it loose and let it fall backwards towards the frame. Now, if things don't line up here with the back of the seat, we always want to loosen with our 5mm Allen these clamps that hold the struts, because the struts adjust in and out, but also, as you can see here, they go side to side. So if things are not lined up directly, it's going to look like the strut is not going to line up with the seat. If we loosen these bolts, then everything can line up nice and evenly. So once we have that attached, then we can retighten our clamps, and then tighten the quick release skewer at the top to attach the seat back to the seat strut. Alright, so we have a pretty nice preliminary seat angle here. We have our seat base attached. Everything's nice and clean and secure. We have our handlebars, our brakes, our preliminary setup. We're getting close, guys. Okay, on our pedals, pre-grease the threads, and each one has a left and a right etched on the inside of the spindle. So now the right, of course, goes on the right side if you're sitting on the bike. So we're going to take our right and our left pedal, and these will thread in. The key to pedals is if you're back pedaling is when they should thread in on each side. You definitely do not want to cross thread your pedals. Here I'm going to back pedal these on nice and snug, and once they get all the way on, I'm going to use my 15mm open end wrench that's included in your toolkit to tighten the pedals down nice and snug. And once that's done, our pedals are installed. Alright, I'm just going to glove up for our chain. So we have our chain and our quick link. Let's get our quick link here out of the separate package. Now the easiest way to install the chain is simply drape it over the chain ring to start, and then go around the back side of the cassette. Once we have the chain just kind of setting like that, we can go down here to the derailleur. Now some important things to note: the chain goes around the back side of the cassette, it goes over the first jockey wheel, but we want to avoid the small metal stop that you see here. A lot of people just route the chain right over this, and then you have a bunch of noise and bad shifting. So it goes over the jockey wheel, but it has to go past this little stop. And then same thing on the bottom, it has to go around the bottom jockey wheel, but again it has to avoid the small bracket that's at the back side of every rear derailleur. So we're going to route our chain around the lower jockey wheel to avoid that stop. Now we have a nice clean chain line through the derailleur. Okay, now for our quick link. Since we have a 1x system here, I just like pulling the chain back through the derailleur like this. So we're going to wind up with our quick link at the top. So I'm going to take my quick link, I'm going to put one end through the end of the chain and the other end through the front side of the chain in my hand, and I'm going to simply hold the chain and pull back and attach the quick link together with the chain on the top. And if you have a third hand, somebody to hold the derailleur, that helps. But once we have that set there, then we just put a little pressure on the cranks and it'll close that quick link nice and easy for us. Alright, we have our seat pad. The bottom is easy enough. We're going to simply undo the Velcro for the bottom. We're going to save the back for now. I'll show you why in a minute, but we're going to attach the bottom of the seat cushion, get our Velcro nice and secure down on there. Now the back, we have a little relief for your spine in the seat. So what we're going to do is, rather than span the entire space with the Velcro and have a gap underneath the relief, I like to cut these Velcro pieces in half. Once we have those cut in half, we can install the back Velcro on either side of the relief. So there I'm going in the same place as before. I'm just doing one half on one side and one half on the other, orienting the top ones vertically so you get a little bit more coverage, as you can see there. Then we avoid having a sticky section of the Velcro right over the relief in the seat. Once we have that in place, nice and even left and right, now our seat pad is secure. Alright, one of the last things we need to do is attach our cables. So on our derailleur cable and both our brake cables, front and rear, we're going to trim those and use a pliers or a cable cutter to install the small cable crimps at the end of the cables to prevent them from fraying. And once you've completed this step, that's basically it. Your Cruzbike T50 is complete. Again, we have other resources for fit. Please take a view of our other videos for fit and adjustment. Always take time to read over the literature, including the Romance Guide, for a lot of tips on riding. We have other videos with some pro tips for learning to ride your cruise bike. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at cruzbike.com, And again, thank you so much for purchase of a cruise bike, and happy riding.